Congratulations to His Grace, the Reverend Dr. Jason Charles Gordon. I think we should congratulate all our honorary graduates once more. As we thank them for their outstanding contributions to national development. I would like to invite His Grace, the Reverend Dr. Jason Charles Gordon, to bring remarks on behalf of the honorees. I now invite you, the Reverend Dr. Jason Charles Gordon, Honorary Doctor of Humane Letters.
Graduates, congratulations to you. You pressed forward, I'm sure under very challenging circumstances, and here you are today. Here you are today. Yeah, give yourselves a round of applause. When I was a teen, my father had a sailboat called Matabele. And one Tuesday during the holidays, we were down in Scotland Bay. And when we set out to come back to port, we had a little challenge. There was no breeze. A little sailboat, needs a breeze. I said, all right, so we turned on the engine and we were motoring back up. And just outside Tetron, the engine conked out. And there was a ferocious Remu current pulling us back through the first boca. And in the midst of this wonderful challenge, I said to my father, we have the dinghy and a little outboard engine. Let me tow the boat. So I put the engine on the dinghy, launched, went, put a rope, and started to try to tow this yacht. And I had my engine all out. And although I was doing everything I could, all I did was manage to slow down the rate at which we were going backwards. But sometimes that is progress, because we didn't get out of the first boca and we didn't get into real peril. I should tell you that this little engine came about because when we were in Beckway, Dad went into a shop, and as he was shopping, I looked around and I saw 3 scrap heaps of parts, and I started to pull pieces from each of the scrap heaps, and he said, what are you doing? I said, that heap that I've just made, that's an engine. He said, are you sure? And the fella sold it for nearly nothing, and I put it together happily and got it to work by a miracle. Sometimes, we have to do things that are interesting, innovative. And sometimes we have to do things against all odds. You are graduating into one of the most dynamic moments of history. For 500 years, the scientific revolution has had its sway and given us incredible progress. 500 years, we have benefited from technology, from science, from innovation. We have cultivated the mind in a way that no civilization has done before. We have the electronic microscope that could look 500,000 times into the smallest particle, and the new James Webb telescope that can see the outer reaches of space, where we could see the beginnings of time itself. When we recognize where we are as a society, as a global people, there are very strong global currents that are pushing us as a little nation, as a little region. And these mighty currents that are moving against us are somewhat perilous at times. You know, we believe that through science, through technology, and through the cultivation of the mind, that we would solve all problems, that we would build the kingdom of God here on earth, and that we would end global poverty, that we would end all wars, and that we would usher in an era of peace. And as we look around, we are now on the brink of a war that could be continental, that could be nuclear. And rationality that brought about these weapons hasn't cultivated the human conscience and soul to understand how and why technology should be used and when it ought not to be used. We have an oil addiction in the Western world, and through this oil addiction, we have gone close to war many, many times, and again right now. And because of this oil addiction, despite Russia's push on peace in Europe, Russia has increased its oil earnings by 38% during this war. And we can't do anything because we need the oil. We're facing an ecological disaster. The UN has said that we have reached places now that are unsustainable and irreparable, and that the ecological challenge that we face is escalating at a rate far faster than we ever imagined. 2/5 of the planet is in poverty, and despite all that we have with such excess, we still have so many people living in poverty. 50 million people are living in slavery. That's far, far more than the transatlantic slave trade that formed our region and our nation. René Descartes, in an attempt to solve the problem of knowledge, how do I know that I know anything at all, came up with his famous formula, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And this sleight of hand, he turned the human being to be the center of knowledge of everything else. And so the I becomes more important than the we. And the I becomes more important than the community, the nation, or the world. Immanuel Kant has challenged rationality and shown that pure reason has its own irrationality built into it. And we are here where we are, with these global currents pushing against us in such ferocious ways because we have overplayed one dimension of the human, the mind, the rational dimension of the human. But in doing so, we have been underplaying other dimensions of the human heart, the human spirit, the human capacity for love. The global currents are pushing us as a nation and as a region into very perilous places. And we might not have what we need to move the ship of state out of the peril. But maybe if we had a little engine that we could construct from a scrap heap somewhere, maybe, just maybe, we could avoid the worst of the peril. As a civilization, we have conquered the highest peaks of knowledge that are before us, and yet the inner landscape of the human heart remains, for the most part, a desolate, uncultivated landscape. And as much as we have done with knowledge and technology, is as poor as we have become in humanity, in the heart, in the soul, in what is most important, that makes us most human. The future of humanity is at stake from all these big global currents. And we need to find a way to move this ship that seems to have its sails fluttering in the breeze and to have no engine at this time to move us. We need to find a way to move out of peril. My thesis is that the fundamental challenge facing Trinidad and Tobago and the world as a whole is a challenge of the heart. It is a spiritual challenge. We are in a spiritual crisis. Albert Einstein has famously said, "You cannot solve a problem at the same level of thinking that we were at when we created the problem in the first place. And so we have to ask, how do we solve these great challenges that we face? And while we need mind, technology, innovation, there's another dimension of the human that we have been sadly lacking. The motivation of the heart remains an enigma to us. And although we have been so advanced in so many ways, when it comes to the face-to-face relationships between people, between groups, and between societies and civilizations, we seem so poor that we could allow a war to escalate with so many nuclear weapons around. Politically, if I look at the local currents in Trinidad and Tobago, there was a Nigel Henry poll in 2019 that says, we are so racially divided that governance and politics can't work easily. Because one tribe, when they're in power, the other tribe think they're doing a terrible job. But their tribe think they're doing really well. And the other tribe, when they're in power, the next tribe think they're doing a terrible job. But their tribe thinks they're doing very well. We are in an age where there is no political engine right now to move us from the perils that we are facing in this state. Our murder rate has been in the top 7 of the nations of the world, which is crazy. And just yesterday, the children of Rose Hill had to duck under their benches and their tables as gunfire was happening for a minute and a half outside, traumatizing an entire school. We've had 15 murders in a 72-hour period recently. And when it comes to corruption, we're number 52. And that's not a nice number to have. The higher up you go, the less corrupt you are. We're 52 down that chain. We've changed governments, ministers of national security, police commissioners, and the murder rate and the corruption does not change easily. In fact, when it changes, it goes up and not down. David Rudder said in his song, Another Day in Paradise, he starts the song by saying, forged. That is the first word of the anthem. We're so damn corrupt, that is the problem. In 1985, we had a visit from Dr. Bromley, who was an expert in substance abuse. And when he visited Trinidad to do a program called Chemical People to bring drug awareness, as he walked the streets of the city and met all sorts of people, he was in shock. Because in 1985, the use of cocaine in Trinidad was far worse than it was on the streets of America, that he had seen as an expert. And he said to us then, if you do not do something very seriously right now, you will not recognize your country in 20 years' time. I'm afraid Dr. Bromley was right. At the heart of the corruption and at the heart of the gangs and at the heart of the problem that we have is illegal gangs, illegal drugs, and illegal guns on our cities and in our streets and in every place that we have. We have a culture of disrespect that is so real that you hear it in the talk shows, you hear it in how we speak to one another. These are problems of the soul. These are problems of the spirit. These are problems of the heart. There was a cabinet minister in the 1980s who brought to cabinet the problem of the drug culture and said to cabinet that we know who the drug leaders are, and he called names. That evening, and this is in the 1980s, he got a call saying, your wife was at such and such a place, and your children were at such and such a place. If you continue, we know how to find you. And the only people he spoke to were people in the cabinet at the time. The outbreak of the party, the hedonism, the nakedness, the pleasure, this pursuit of money, is really a spiritual problem, because when we don't feel good inside of ourselves, we try to solve that problem by external stimulation. And when you look at us, it's not just that we're having fun. It is that we've gone to a culture of nakedness and indecency. Jam naked and hypersexuality seems to be the order of the day. Dr. Williams, on the eve of independence, said to this nation, there can be no Mother India or no Mother Africa, no Mother China or no Mother Europe. There can be only one mother, Mother Trinidad and Mother Tobago. And a mother cannot discriminate against her children. And the children cannot continue to disrespect each other. These are the problems of the soul. We are addicted to money and to sensuality and pleasure seeking, to honor and to wealth. We live with such disrespect. We're in a kind of an escapism at the moment because we can't face the reality of what we're facing, and because things are so difficult for all of us in this beautiful little country. I suppose you can say, quoting a song from yesteryear, we've been looking for love in all the wrong places, in all the wrong spaces. And having not found it, we keep at the activity, not getting better. We are adrift as a nation, as we've never been before. And global currents are pushing us in some directions that we really don't want to go. And local currents are pushing us also in directions that are perilous. And I would say to you, look in the scrap heap of what was discarded from your grandmother and your great-grandmothers, and see if we can't find enough parts to put together a little engine. A little engine that might help us at least to slow down the rate at which we are going backwards, if not to move us forward into a safer place. Aristotle has said that about happiness, no one would call a man ideally happy if he has not got a particle of courage, nor temperance, nor decency, nor the good sense, but is afraid of the flies that flutter by him, cannot refrain from any of the most outrageous actions in order to gratify a desire to eat or to drink, and ruins his dearest friends for the sake of a penny. Happiness cannot be found by pursuit of money, by pursuit of pleasure, by pursuit of power, or by pursuit of honor. These roads have been closed off 2,300 years ago by Aristotle. And he says to us, if you want to understand what happiness means, it is about wealth, but not in the sense of money, but in the sense of friendship, in the sense of wisdom, and in the sense of virtue. And unless we become a people who are friends, deeply friends with one another, who are pursuing knowledge in its deepest and most profound sense, and seeking virtue in everything, we will not find happiness, not in our time. Virtue is the key to true friendship, but it is also the key to knowledge. And virtue is part of this little engine that we must reconstruct if we're going to move from where we are to a place of true happiness. Remember what Einstein said, you can't solve a problem at the same level at which you created it. The politicians, the business leaders, the religious leaders, community leaders have tried solving the problem, and we see the result. Look in the scrap heap and find the parts to build a little engine. Because the truth is, all of us, if we found that little engine that we could construct, and if each of us used that little engine, we find a way to move this gigantic ship into safe harbor and then set it on a course that would be more meaningful than the directions we are in right now. Perennial philosophy and religion, when we look at all our religious traditions, there's three things that they hold in common. The first is a golden rule. The second is a care for the poor. And the third is our mystical tradition of unity and union with the divine and all of humanity. And that's whether we talk of Hinduism, Islam, or Christianity as the major religions in our lands. Revival of our nation requires of us finding a new consciousness. And this means exploring a new space. And this means while we are reveling in the technologies and the knowledge, we also have to start reveling in the space of the heart, the soul, and of the spirit. We all want someone else to solve the problem for us. And we all want to give it to the politician and ask them, or the trade union leader, or the pundit, or the imam, or the pastor, or the priest, or the university. But the truth is they cannot. They cannot solve the problem. Not unless each one of us is willing to be part of that solution. We all have a part to play. We all have to make our contribution. And even if you think all you have is a little piece of engine in the face of a ship that is so big, be as naive as I was when I was 16 years old, and use your engine to move this ship in a new direction. The golden rule says, treat others as you want them to treat you. And this is found in every nation, in every culture, every language, and every religion. And if we start constructing a value system in Trinidad and Tobago based on the golden rule, we can all agree at least upon that as a minimum agreement of values. The care for the poor is part of the golden rule. How would you like to be treated if you were in that position? And if we understand that, then when we have a little community like Rose Hill where the gunfire is so rapid, and other communities where the education is poor because these are poor communities that do not have the resources that they need, then we have to understand that the education system has to privilege our poorest communities and give them the best resources possible to ensure all of our children get an education that will move them out of poverty and to become a solid citizen of this beautiful and beloved country we call Trinidad and Tobago. Our mystical tradition is part of what unifies all of us. The Sufi tradition from Islam and the Hindus have their own mystical tradition, and so do we Christians. And at the heart of the mystical tradition is always that there is a sacrifice to be paid if we want to become and evolve to a better consciousness. Sacrifice is part and parcel of the evolution process of consciousness. And in our culture, we do not want to pay sacrifice. In our culture, we want it all, we want it up front. But in a world gone wrong, communion can only be built on sacrifice. And in a nation gone wrong, prosperity, true wealth, and true happiness can only be built on sacrifice. Your grandmother and your great-grandmother knew what I'm talking about. Look at their lives again and pull from their lives the parts that we need to construct the engine that will move us from where we are in peril to a nation of which we can all be proud. Gratitude is one of the keys of spirituality. Any truly spiritual person is a person of gratitude. And when you meet people who have ingratitude, you know that they have no spirit, no heart, no soul. The old people used to tell us, ingratitude is worse than witchcraft. Practice gratitude every single day. Find things for which you are grateful in your life every single day. Treat people as you want to be treated, and find a pathway for union with your God. Then, if each one of us here put a little engine on a little dinghy and start pulling at this mighty nation, Trinidad and Tobago, we might move this nation, and we might move our people, and we might chart a new course. And then every creed and race will find an equal place. And then the angels will add, and may God bless our nation.
Thank you very much, Your Grace, the Reverend Dr. Jason Charles Gordon, Honorary Doctor of Humane